And what is up? Welcome in GC Live Monday episode of the show. Chris, not gonna lie, man, we got plenty to get to. Commitments, possible commitments on the way, cookout scoop. I don't even know if we're going to get into football itself today, but certainly as this week goes on, we will turn the page 100% to preseason camp, which will kick off actually at the end of this week. You got a USC Media Day as well, where fans will be able to hear from coaches and players one last time before camp gets rolling. So busy week, plenty going on, man. I'm excited, but first, got to tell the folks, if you want to buy a new home, if you're in the market for a new home, maybe you want to be watching South Carolina football this year in some brand new digs, our man Clint.Hammond can help you do that. Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. Whether this is your fifth home purchase, your first, somewhere in between, maybe you're an investor and you're looking for somebody new to deal with, Clint is your guy. He can walk you through that process every single step of the way as far as getting you qualified and just knowing what your monthly payment might be. So shout out to Clint, big Gamecock fan, and obviously we appreciate him being a huge supporter of GC Live for a number of years now. Chris, let's start with the latest news from yesterday. Not really surprising by any means, but certainly something that, maybe if you'd gone back in time a month ago, I don't know if Zy'marion Lang was a guy we were necessarily talking about as much as we should have been looking back. Kind of a little bit of a low-key recruitment. He was not one of the guys that took his official visit in June to South Carolina. That's kind of, I don't know about you, man, but that's how I use that as my guide. Like, if you take an OV, it's a sure sign that there is mutual interest on both sides. So, he was not one of the OV guys, but then I kind of looked back the last maybe 3 weeks or so is when we started to hear more and more about the possibility of him being in the class, hearing that, yes, he was a priority. Yes, he's a take. Yes, he's highly interested. And then I felt like leading up to the commitment on Sunday, you kind of more and more felt like this could be headed South Carolina's way. That, of course, happens. Little after 5, between 5 and 6 on Sunday, he makes his pledge to South Carolina.
Yeah, and I go back to the beginning of June, Wes. June 2nd, remember that day? That is the first camp day for South Carolina for Shane Beamer football camps. We had 9 camps this year that you and I covered, and that was day 1. And so we walk in, and, you're trying to find people over there in the indoor, and all of a sudden, midfield, here's this 6'3" kid talking to Torian Gray, and you go, who could that possibly be? And pretty quickly ascertained that it was Zymerian Lang. And, he was there, Wes, all day chatting up with Torian, And that kind of got my attention. Now you're kind of going, all right, what's the deal here? Because we knew Zy'marion Lang had an offer. There had been some conversation on social media. Zy'marion Lang had tweeted some things, or we would talk to him every now and then, and he would mention South Carolina.
All right, I think we just lost Chris. Hopefully I'm still live, y'all. Hit me in the chat. Let me know. Obviously, whenever we do these things live, sometimes you're going to have issues, but have not had these issues in a while. So this is kind of new for us to have any problems, but hit me in the chat. Let me know that y'all still have me live. But yeah, big pickup for South Carolina. I think a versatile guy. We'll try to get Chris back in here in a second. And he is someone that early on, you go back to his comments 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, and Lang was someone they were being recruited, or that they were recruiting as kind of, you're a wide receiver and a DB. He really liked that. He liked that there was going to be the opportunity to play both ways. Not necessarily to play both ways, but to have the chance to play either or, I should say. As this thing sort of progressed, it turned more and more into the possibility or to the plan of Lang playing wide receiver. And from what I've been told, that's what he wants to play. That's his plan. That's kind of where he sees himself. Now, it's a situation where I think for Lang, he's aware, if it were for whatever reason not work out at wide receiver, he has a skill set where he could help South Carolina at defensive back. So I really like when you add versatile prospects. I really like when you have a guy who you almost have a fallback option for, because we know how recruiting is. Nothing's a guarantee, nothing's a sure thing, but when a guy comes in and hey, if it doesn't work out at one position, there's always a chance for him to play another. That I think helps with the percentage chance that they are going to pan out. So you look at this kid, he is your prototypical Florida athlete. I know we always talk about Florida athletes and sort of just the number of guys down there that just have innate athleticism. He is one of those guys. I think, as far as skill set, as far as maybe adding some muscle, adding some weight to that frame, there's still some development here to go. That's probably why he's a 3-star guy as opposed to a 4-star guy. But you look at the length, you look at the speed, the fluidity of his movements, the ability to go get the football. And, you're talking about a guy who at 6'3" adds some height. And again, if it were to be a situation where he ends up playing defensive back down the road as well, there's obviously a lot to work with here if you are Torian Gray too. So I like versatile guys. I think it definitely heightens the chance that he's going to end up being a guy who can contribute to your football team. And it really gives South Carolina a little bit of momentum going into what we think is going to be a key August for them. Obviously July, fans got a little upset during July. A good part of that was more that a lot of these July guys, what we were assuming were July guys or anticipating being July guys, end up pushing back to August. So, it could end up being a big loss for South Carolina. Let's try to bring Chris back in. Chris, we got you, man. I can see you. I think I can hear you too.
I got, Wes, a notification on my computer. We obviously have a computer going when we do this show, 2 computers to be exact, that said it was not my fault. So I would apologize, but I can't take any responsibility. No, I don't know what happened. We were rolling along and talking about Zymerian Lang, and then I was not there anymore. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. If it does, I will exit and I will come back in once again. So my apologies.
Yeah, no worries. I'll just keep talking. I was like, all right, guys, y'all got to tell me in the chat if I'm still going or if we're off air or what's happening. And they were like, nah, dude, keep talking. So I just, I kept going, but I already told them all about Lang. I said, hey, it's a versatile guy, man. Yeah. I think there's a case that he should be listed in the rankings as an athlete, because I think he is a true athlete in that I could see him playing on either side. But as we've also said, as we wrote on Gamecock Central, as we've talked about, the plan is for him to play wide receiver. And, I think you can certainly see with the length, the speed, the fluidity, there's some upside here. I think it's just his thing in college is going to be, can he come in, kind of put on some weight, just keep developing kind of more so that skill set. I think from an athleticism standpoint, he's got everything you're looking for.
He does. And Wes, I was trying to find some stats on Zymerian Lang. And, sometimes you would think in 2023 that stats from high school games would be just so readily available, because almost everything else is. They can be pretty hit or miss. Max Preps has 9 games listed. Sometimes I found when you're looking it up, trying to look up a guy's stats, that even on Max Preps are just incomplete. Sometimes coaches are entering them. They're not always there. This says 28 catches for 470 and 5 touchdowns. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. But what I can tell you is when you turn on the film, you see a guy that, yes, I agree with you, Wes, is going to have to put on some weight at the college level. But he's listed at 6'3". He looks it, Wes, I think, on his film. And if you just look at him Watching him stand beside Torian Gray, for instance, I can see 6'2", 6'3", definitely a guy that can run. That's pretty evident on his film. I like the potential two-way ability, but I told you, Wes, I told you this earlier today. I have now evolved as a person. I've graduated from wanting to turn everybody into a DB. Now I'm wanting to put the ball in dynamic people's hands a little bit more. So I think wide receiver is a bigger need for South Carolina from a numbers standpoint in this class, not only because of the guys that they're losing. Again, they're losing Juice Wells. They're losing AB. They're losing Xavier Leggett. DeCarrion Joyner is now a running back, but he played receiver. They're losing a lot of guys off this roster. They're going to need to replenish it with some young guys. When you look at the receiver board, you got Mazio Bennett, but now you got another guy who's a lot different type of player than Bennett. Bringing him in, I think he could play DB, but I like the idea of putting him at receiver. He's got some long speed, some downfield ability. I like this pickup for South Carolina.
You can never have too many Florida guys either, in my opinion. I mean,
yeah,
that whole Florida athlete stereotype, I guess, is the way you'd say it, but a good stereotype. I mean, you never have too many of those guys, and we'll certainly be tracking him. Maybe a chance for him to have a big senior year down there. I'm with you. Those are the numbers I went with. That's what I found. You can never quite tell if that stuff is accurate as far as stats go, but a guy South Carolina certainly likes, and we'll see what that receiver position brings moving forward, man. I mean, I think obviously they're going to play this thing out to the finish with Jonathan Paylor. I personally tend to think that's, I don't want to say it's done, but I think it's trending towards that. Like I'm going to be pretty surprised at this point if it's not NC State, is my read on the situation. Not that that's breaking news or a surprise to anyone based on what's kind of been floating around out there the last couple of weeks. But then, where do you go from there? I think South Carolina will continue to monitor. They'll monitor guys that are committed other places too. I'm sure they'll monitor Keelan Adams. I'm sure once you start getting into the season and then post 2023 season, I think you're certainly going to take a hard look at the transfer portal at receiver as well.
Absolutely.
When you look at the veteran guys that you're going to lose. So they'd love to have Paylor. I tend to think it's one of those where if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, like I don't think there's much surprise here, in my opinion, but we will certainly see as it gets closer to him deciding at the end of this week. But yeah, so you got Bennett, you got Lang. We'll see what that position brings moving forward. And some other guys, man, that were in for the cookout. Let's keep it with this 24 class while we're at it. And you talked about the need at receiver versus the need at defensive back. They do already have some talented defensive backs committed as well. I think if you're looking at this class with Jalewis Solomon in it, then that completely changes the entire perception of this DB class too. Like I think it's a good DB class. I think it's borderline really good DB class. I think if you add Jalewis to it, you're like, all right, this is a pretty great DB class.
Yeah, he could help push it over the top. Wes, losing out on Malcolm Ziegler, I think again, it's more about the guys that you signed than the ones you miss on. We tend to focus on what if they could have gotten that guy, but who are you signing at the end of the day in your class? Now, Malcolm Ziegler was more of probably a safety, and we said at the time, hey, if you get a Malcolm Ziegler, that finishes out your safety class because you would have had Kelvin Hunter, David Busey, Malcolm Ziegler. You're done. And that would have been an outstanding safety class. We'll see what transpires there, right? Jalewis Solomon, probably more of a corner for the Gamecocks. But what this would mean is if you get him, you could pair him, in essence, with Braden Lee at corner, another 4-star guy out of Maryland. You get Braden Lee, you get Jalewis Solomon. You feel like you got a really nice 1-2 punch there at corner. And then you've also got Kelvin Hunter, David Busey committed at safety. Then you go see where the chips fall after that, right? You still got some other guys on the board. Some others could certainly emerge throughout the season. You do still have Cam Michael out of Georgia on the board who, may want to end up playing offense, but he's got the Gamecocks on his list. Not going to decide for a long time. Hey, let's see what happens with that and some other guys. But, yeah, I mean, Jalewis Solomon, longtime target, a guy that South Carolina over the last several months, I think you could say, Wes, has really been steadfast with him, been consistent with him, and I think they've made a move with him too. Another guy who's a two-way athlete. He could certainly play receiver in college. Torian Gray's really taken a liking to him at the corner position. Could be a corner. Could probably play nickel, but I really like the idea of him as a corner. It's been an interesting recruitment to follow over, in particular, Wes, these last few weeks as he kind of really gets closer to his decision.
Yeah, man. I mean, you watch this kid run with the ball too. There would be a case to be made for handing him the football too. I mean, we got the film up right now for those on the video version, and I mean, an athlete in every sense of the word. Now, Torian Gray has been, he has been leading the charge on this guy for quite some time. So, seems like all indications are the plan is for him to play defensive back. I think he can be a lockdown guy. I think he's an early impact. I look the potential, like you said, pairing him with Braden Lee, the potential of what we've heard about Vakari Swain so far, already on campus as a true freshman right now. You can kind of start to see what that cornerback position might look like down the road if it includes a guy like Solomon, because that's another spot now, man. I think you look at safety, the safety nickel types, like they have a bunch of young players at that position. You just lost, obviously, Darius Rush. You lost Cam Smith, and now you're going to lose Marcellus Dial after this season. O.D. Fortune, he's an upperclassman. So you're starting to kind of look, all right, what's the next step at cornerback as well? We'll see if Emory Floyd can take a step this year. We'll see what Swain can do as a true freshman. But I think it's just it's a different conversation if you're talking about Braden Lee and Jalewis Solomon coming in at that spot. And, like you said too, though, Solomon is a guy, he comes in, I think he can pretty much play anywhere you needed him if you really had to. Like, I like everything about this guy on the field, man. Like, I think he would be easily one of the better pickups in this class. And you're talking about a class that has some really highly rated prospects in it.
Yeah, he's just a football player, and you can see why Torian Gray wants him, where this is a guy that might be a little infighting and battling between the Gamecocks coaching staff. They could get him on where to play him, but it seemed pretty consistent, Wes, lately with wanting to play him at DB, and you can see why here. Just kind of we talked about the typical, like, stereotypical Florida athlete. I think this is your stereotypical, like, South Georgia tough, just football player, right? Just baller that can play anywhere. Wes, along with the guys that they have committed, when you think about the potential of the DB class, if you could land Solomon, I think Gamecocks fans now may get even more excited about DBs because of what Torian Gray's done the first couple years at Carolina. You pointed this out on the forum the other day. You made your Torian Gray appreciation post on the Insiders Forum. So the past 2 seasons at South Carolina, they entered the season with huge questions at DB, right? And Torian Gray, obviously there's still issues with the defense that really need to be solved this year, but he has erased some of those questions with his development track record the past couple of years. Remember safety in 2021, for instance. Who's going to start? Who's going to play? Jalen Foster, All-American season. Last season, okay, Jalen Foster's gone. Who's going to play? Who's going to start? 2 true freshmen who enrolled in the summer. Cam Smith, Darius Rush, obviously very talented dudes, but you see the development trajectory that they continued working with Torian Gray for 2 years. Now both of those guys NFL draft picks and high draft picks at that. So you think about pairing this DB class, or what this DB class could be if you add Solomon and another piece or two, really start to get, I think, excited thinking about the potential of what Torian Gray could do with these guys.
No doubt. Let's hit. So Craig's one of our loyal watchers on here. Let's hit one of his questions. He said, "Is Sandlin going to get a shot at running back?" Yeah, that's the plan right now. I know there's one person in Columbia very happy about that, and he's my co-host on this show. Chris has been calling for that one since before we even heard it was a possibility. And I mean, this guy, you look back at his high school film, you want to talk about tough nose, man. Like this guy has some just football player to him. And, you know, I think the fact he played quarterback, he was kind of I'll put your best athlete at QB and snapping the ball. I think played through some injuries. I think just we knew, all right, Sandlin, and I think this is what we said when he committed. This is a guy that's going to help your program, even if he's never an All-American. Like, you feel good about special teams, backup role. Not that is his upside. Like, I think his upside is much higher than that. But you just feel good about him impacting you in a positive way. But is there a scenario where Sandlin just kind of locks in at running back and they're like, dang, this guy's a running back?
You could see it. I mean, remember the what we had heard at the golf tournament, Wes, at Birdies with Beamer last week, kind of with some of the coaches talking about looking back on DeCarrion Joyner and just seeing him in dialogue and saying, when he saw him in bowl practice, like, the guy kind of moves like a running back, right? And then you eventually make that move. Spring practice, he gets out there and you're watching DeCarrion Joyner. The coaches are watching DeCarrion Joyner and you're going, oh, like this is going, we thought it would go well, but this is even better than anticipated. I could see something similar with Sandlin. A lot different player than DeCarrion Joyner out of high school and currently, bigger, weighs not that much more, right? What's he even listed at right now, Wes? Maybe 230. I don't even have it in front of me. DeCarrion Joyner, 229. Just throw that out again. But Sandlin's a big kid, and a lot of high school coaches in the area, the feedback that South Carolina got from what we were told was this kid's really good. Like, as you said, Wes, kind of you watch the kid in high school, and it's one of those guys where you go, yeah, that's the best player on the field, and you just put him at quarterback. So he would just get out there, and he put up really good stats in the passing game too, but just kind of a natural runner and a big kid, hard to tackle, good vision. Would not surprise me at all if he eventually became a quite good college running back. So we'll see where that one goes.
Yeah, shout out to whoever did his huddle, by the way. This is run plays only. I mean, love it. It's like they were producing the show for us here, man. That's pretty awesome. Hey, what do you think of my idea that Carolina is going to quietly build this little pipeline to Alabama and Mississippi where they're getting maybe 2 or 3 under the radar, or, in the case of like a Daniel Hill, maybe, a stud, but land a couple of guys from Bama and Mississippi every class?
I think it's incredibly smart, and it could be viable. Like, we could see that happen. Heck, I mean, South Carolina, they went and got some under the radar guys from time to time out of the state of Alabama. Taylor Stallworth was one. Like, people don't talk about Taylor Stallworth enough. NFL player, really good player. Captain Munnerlin, Darian Stewart. Like, you can find those guys out of Alabama that Alabama's going to recruit, obviously, their own state. They're going to recruit the Southeast. They're also going to recruit nationally. Auburn is not as national as Auburn in terms of where they recruit, but they're obviously going to recruit their own state. Ole Miss and Mississippi State are going to recruit Alabama, right? They're going to recruit their own states in Mississippi, but there are players there. There's plenty of them. And whether it's a Daniel Hill, who everybody wants, or it's a little bit more of an under the radar guy, I think you can go get him. it's all about being smart with what you're doing with Shane Beamer. So he's made his niche the DMV, right? Do really well in your own state. There's some evidence that Beamer is doing that based on look at the commitment list, what they're doing, and then go into the DMV and go be competitive there and land some guys there. You're the closest SEC school. So they have certainly done that. The proof is in the pudding and could be even more pudding, if they go land Dylan Stewart. So I think this is another instance where, yeah, you can go into Atlanta and you can battle every SEC and ACC and Big Ten school. And that's fine if you win a few of those battles. But if you can go another place and get some guys, whether it's making a good evaluation or just beating a bunch of schools on them, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I love your idea about the Alabama-Mississippi pipeline. And there's some ties there, particularly with Jody Wright, who's coached at Mississippi State, coached at Alabama. He was an assistant for Nick Saban on his recruiting staff. Makes tons of sense for South Carolina.
And a guy that just gets after it, man. And again, I'm not really saying – I'm not saying that means that you have 10 guys from in a class that are from Bama, Mississippi. But I think if you're South Carolina, you got to find ways to be efficient. And obviously that starts with in-state. But if you have, let's even say a good year, man, these days, if you have 5, 6, 7 guys in-state that you're after hard, that's kind of a good year for the Palmetto State with where it's at right now. So you got to find a way to find little pockets that can be friendly to you elsewhere. North Carolina has not been that place. So the DMV, as you said, has. They're trying to make Savannah one of those places as well. But I think with Jody Wright's ties, Bama, Mississippi, you can find players there, man, that aren't necessarily – not that they can't land great players from there. If you land Hill, that's a perfect example of, hey, you went in there and got a guy, a highly rated guy. And when I say great players, I'm talking about prospects, highly rated guys. Obviously, some of these guys may be more a Sandlin who wasn't, he's a 3-star player, 3-star prospect, but you bring him in, develop him, hard-nosed guy, fits your program, fits what you're looking for in a player. And right on cue, man, let's kind of hop around a little bit here. Different class, but lots of positive vibes right now for South Carolina with Landon Duckworth, the 2026 quarterback, a sentence that really hurts me to even say out loud.
Yeah.
But it's true. We can all take this in together. 2026, let me say that again, 2026 quarterback, offers from lots of schools, including South Carolina. And Chris, you have entered a RPM prediction with the Jackson, Alabama quarterback.
This one advanced quickly, Wes. South Carolina doesn't even have obviously you're still very much working on the 2024 class. No 2025 commitment yet, which is not atypical. It's no problem. It's still very early. They may go ahead and skip ahead a little bit here in the game and get a 2026 guy on the board. Landon Duckworth really, really got on the radar this spring. Picked up a Gamecock offer, visited for the spring game, had a really good first look. Dowell Loggins, the offensive coordinator, Jody Wright, who we were just talking about, obviously the area recruiter there in Alabama. They both went and watched him throw. And you could see Wes is wide-eyed. This guy, sometimes the freak term is a little overused, but I've heard it used with Landon Duckworth. 6'3", 187, true dual threat, can throw it, can certainly run it. Jody Wright has, from my understanding, some family ties to Jackson, Alabama that have maybe helped out a little bit here. Gamecocks maybe getting on the board early with a pretty good one here.
Holy, dude, I had not watched this. You've watched it, I'm assuming?
Yeah. What were you were impressed by what was that, an 80-yard touchdown run, I guess?
Well, I was impressed by that first throw to the back of the end zone where he reset his feet and then threw a freaking missile. And then he turned the corner and left these dudes in the dust.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a freshman.
Yeah. Freshman and a good looking freshman, right? So you start thinking about, 6'3", 187 as a freshman. This guy's going to get bigger. He's going to improve. You would think he's not maxed out in all areas of his game. Already got a really nice offer list, Wes. And someone that Carolina jumped in on early. Whew. Pretty good looking player here. I actually have some stats on him too. Let's see, as a freshman, just shy of 2,000 yards, had 1,985 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, also rushed for 355 and 8 touchdowns as a high school freshman at Jackson, Alabama. So the decision date set for August 4th, and the Gamecocks look to be in a really good spot here.
Hey, I don't know who these wide receivers are, but somebody needs
some offers.
Look at these guys too, man. They got some talent on this team, but dang, if you're just listening on the podcast version of our show, I would actually encourage you, if you're a recruiting person, go check it out. Man, these other schools are not going to let this kid leave lightly, in my opinion. Even if he commits to Carolina, you're gonna, and I'm sure South Carolina will. You're gonna have to you have to stay on this guy with it being this early.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking about that a little bit off air, so to speak, the other day, and quarterbacks tend to commit early, Wes. They're going to commit earlier, help recruit, just kind of lock up a spot because it's such a low volume spot. This is taking that to the next level. Is pretty early. And look, especially with this being a kid in Alabama, there is no doubt that Hugh Freeze and Nick Saban and Zach Arnett and Lane Kiffin, they're going to keep an eye on this kid closely. But Carolina, I mean, look, in a good spot. You'd rather, if they do indeed get his commitment on August 4th, you'd rather him have him committed than not, right? Because that gives you a chance to just continue those relationships, kind of ingrain a guy in your program. But will be an absolute heck of a very, very early start to that 2026 class.
Yeah, and by all indications, man, just a mature kid, good communicator, has his head on his shoulders. They're already in on some 2026s that you could say that same sentence about overall, man. Talking to a couple of the offensive line guys that they already have gotten in on and have had on campus. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. I'll tell you what, speaking of moving forward, Chris, shout out to all of the Gamecock Central readers and GC Live viewers, because they have helped our Birddogs campaign so much that they are out of tumblers. So
yeah,
that's both fortunate and unfortunate. If you wanted a tumbler, maybe later, but for now, you missed out on your free tumbler. However, because people who are on our site and other On3 sites throughout the network have used the code so much, they have shifted, and now, guess what? We got something else free. I always like when you do you watch these other YouTube shows and they like do an unboxing. So unboxing, free hat. You got a better camera than I do, Chris, but there you go. There you go. All right. Free hat. So
I just committed to Birddogs. That's what it looked like. I pulled the hat out.
Yeah, good commitment. I'll get that on Twitter right now for you. But yeah, free hat, birddogs.com/Gamecocks, or just go to birddogs.com and just put in promo code Gamecocks. Make a purchase and you'll get a free hat. But dude, shirts on point.
Yeah.
Soft. Very, very picky about my shirts these days. It's got to be soft and it's got to fit right. Birddogs, 5-star, 2 thumbs up. Check them out. You've been telling people about the shorts. I'm going to tell them about the polo. Hit it up, birddogs.com. And again, appreciate them supporting our show. Please, if you're listening, if you're watching, support those who support us. All right, Chris, let's talk about Dylan Stewart.
Let's go.
What you got?
Well, we are now at the point, Wes, where it is possible. I don't know yet. Nobody knows. It's possible Dylan Stewart's taking his last recruiting visit. Have you thought about that?
I
So
have not. Has he thought about that?
I don't know. Time will tell. But he was at South Carolina for the Cookout. We've reported a couple different things on Stewart on GamecockCentral.com. For those of you that are subscribers, you already saw it. He was in town. He stayed 2 nights. Stayed Friday, stayed Saturday. All indications are that it went extremely well. Wes, you're a better unofficial counter of Dylan Stewart's visits to South Carolina. What is your unofficial tally? Are we at 10 yet?
I think we're at 10 or 11, so we'll conservatively say 10.
Okay, conservative. Go 10 conservative. We do know that by far, really not close, been to South Carolina more than anywhere else. That includes schools that are closer to him. His Washington, D.C. home. And we know that we are now right up against a period here in August where schools may not be able to host prospects again. Reason I said Dylan Stewart may have taken his last visit is because in August and then September 1st, September 2nd, unless you have a home game on September 1st or 2nd or sometime in August, you aren't hosting any more prospects. It's a dead period. So Dylan Stewart also, the latest information is he's probably going to make a decision in August or maybe sometime in early September. So to me, Wes, that is a question. When does he make this decision? If it's in August, you feel good. If it's in September, you probably still feel pretty good, right? But he may say in September, let me go take an unofficial to Ohio State for a visit or something like that. Then it's even more something to watch. But all the indications are that South Carolina had another really quality visit with Dylan Stewart, Sterling Lucas, the rest of the staff. They've done a great job here. I think they've done everything that they possibly can to land this kid.
Yeah, and you gotta at this point, man, you're just like, where is the finish line? Because I think South Carolina, I do think they have the lead. And I think you're absolutely right on does it pop up, hey, actually gonna take some more visits in the fall, or is it I'm done with this thing? Because it's we're kind of at like Rick Sandage part of this. It's like, what?
I absolutely love the reference.
Well, you know what I'm getting at. It's like,
yes,
what else can you show him?
You can't do anything else. I remember during Rick Sandage's recruitment, first of all, people are about to get mad at us because Rick's career obviously did not go how anybody would have envisioned or wanted. So we're not really drawing a parallel there. But I remember hearing during Rick's recruitment, and they did end up signing him, so it ended up fine. But I remember hearing from someone involved, like, that kid might have been here too much.
Yeah.
God, if you believe in that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're getting at. Like you've done what you can.
They have showed him everything there is to show him. Now you just got to get to that finish line. And I think the fact he has been there so many times, man, not being a local guy, like that just speaks volumes to me. He's given you every chance. I think that's where his comfort level is at South Carolina. I think we're kind of ultimately with Nick Harbor. It was the comfort level at South Carolina, and it was the relationships with the other players at South Carolina, the other recruits at South Carolina. You look at this is the best recruiting as far as committed players of any class we've ever seen at South Carolina. When you look at Reno and Pringle and Mazio and all that bunch. So I think that ends up paying off here. Sterling Lucas has done a fantastic job. Beamer's done a fantastic job. Just the entire collection here has done everything they can to make Dylan Stewart feel most comfortable at South Carolina. You're just sitting there saying, there's this blue blood program in Ohio State that you're just holding them off. So, if the finish line is right around the corner, you got to feel good about South Carolina's chances. And then, man, talk about a national story. It was huge for them when Harbor committed, obviously. That was at the end of the process. I think this is something you could kind of use moving forward to kind of rebuild some of that momentum, potentially getting a guy like Dylan Stewart, potentially adding a guy like Daniel Hill on the 23rd. And obviously, we talked about Jalewis Solomon earlier, but that's a guy that's going to commit on the 5th. So a chance for a big August or August plus September-ish, depending on when Stewart actually does this thing. And so we haven't hit on Hill much today, Chris. So let's maybe give everybody a quick update on him. Was at Alabama over the weekend. Interesting the number of times he has been to Alabama. I think if you're a Carolina fan out there, even if you're in the building, if you're on staff, that is the one thing that I think you're still just a little bit like, all right, man, he has been there a lot. And if we're going to sit there and say, well, Dylan Stewart's been at South Carolina a lot, we got to acknowledge Daniel Hill has been at Alabama a lot. Now, if you're going to sit here and say, well, those are two completely different things, I can get behind that as well because it is a much quicker trip for D. Hill to go to Bama than it is for Dylan Stewart to get from D.C. to Columbia, South Carolina. So I get it. I also think that South Carolina has withstood 10 Bama visits. So why can't they withstand 11 Bama visits? Whatever that number is. So at some point, if Alabama hasn't convinced him that Alabama is the better place for him, then when is it going to happen? Because the difference here is that, at least from what we have heard, we've believed South Carolina has been the favorite for quite some time with Daniel Hill. With Dylan Stewart, we believe South Carolina's been the favorite there as well. So that's why I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth on the number of visits and it mattering. If the number 9 visit didn't make Bama the better spot, then what makes the number 10, number 11? You see what I'm saying? Like at some point, this thing is going to end. And we certainly got word before the Bama visit, Chris, that I think we heard enough that maybe kind of makes you double down on South Carolina being the favorite, at least going into that trip.
So I do think that Bama has chipped away, a little bit. Like if the gap was here, hypothetically, it's kind of just they're making their push, which we knew would happen. It always happens with these big time recruits. It always happens. Even for a guy like Cam Pringle, who's like all South Carolina, basically, there's schools are going to make their push. That's what happens. It's even more amplified, I guess you could say, with a guy like D. Hill when Alabama, Nick Saban, when they want you and when you're that close. To your point, I saw it said today on the Insiders Forum, and there's no problem with it. It's an opinion. I'm just going to explain why I don't really agree with it. Love all our members and all their opinions. But it was said, I don't think Hill's coming here, meaning South Carolina. He's had plenty of opportunities to commit and hasn't. Well, flip side of that, logically, plenty of opportunities to commit to Bama too. Been there more than he's been to South Carolina. They're more of the blue blood, right? That plenty of opportunities for him to commit to Bama. Why hasn't he? Our guys at Bama Online West even reported there have been some people around the Alabama program kind of surprised he hasn't committed. Well, you start thinking, well, why is that? Well, it's because South Carolina has made this very, very difficult. And we know from what's been communicated some behind the scenes is that South Carolina has been in a good spot. They've been the leader. Sometimes they've been publicly the leader. Oftentimes, for most of the process, they've been also the private leader. So I think sometimes we kind of overcomplicate it when the reality is this is hard decisions for these players. Even if they got a place that they really want to go and that's their favorite school, another program or other programs can make it hard on them. That's the point of recruiting. That's why recruiters are good. Schools are often pretty close to each other. So I don't know for sure what Daniel Hill's going to do. I've got my RPM pick still pointed at Gamecocks. If you made me call it, that's what I think is going to happen. I also, at the same time, think that Bama has continued to narrow the gap here where you do get, if you're a Gamecock fan, more nervous about it. But I don't think that him going there again means he's going to Bama. And I don't think the fact that he's been there more means he's going to Bama. I just think it's gotten close. South Carolina's got a lot going for it, too.
Yeah, to your point about Cam Pringle, did you or did anybody listening, watching, did y'all see Cam's recent tweet about his art folder from when he was a kid? Have you seen this, Chris?
Yep.
So I'm going to put it up. First grade art folder. So this is a guy who, as a first grader, has his art folder that has a Clemson tiger paw with a big X on it. And then, honestly, a drawing of one of the best Gamecock block Cs that I've ever seen from an elementary student. Super impressive. But even the first grader drawing block Cs in his art notebook, you had to fight it out at the end just to close it out, you know?
He had to have traced that. Right.
I mean,
I couldn't even trace it, and I'm 37.
There's some detail in this thing, though, man. How do you trace? You can't trace that detail.
That's true. Probably can't. We need to get Kev Roche on and consult with him and get his rating for a first grader. I know I couldn't do it. I shouldn't have said that. I apologize to Cam. He probably just straight up drew it and just making all us commoners look very bad.
Impressive though, man. Good grief. Pretty awesome. Good job, Cam. Guy can do it all. Football player, recruiter, artist, basketball player.
He was probably also bigger than me when he was in first grade.
Yeah, well, yeah. True. Who have we not talked about, Chris? I know. All right. There's a lot of guys actually. We hit on this on 107.5. Speaking of other things floating around on social media, how pumped did Gamecock fans get thinking about the possibility of Elijah Griffin and Amari Adams, not just in the same recruiting class, but lined up beside each other on the same defensive line? If you're Travian Robertson, you're sitting there allowing yourself to dream a little bit.
Yeah, there's a picture floating around those guys on campus. They got to hang out a little bit. Getting Elijah Griffin back was good, man. I think probably about his fifth visit to South Carolina. There's been a couple visits during this calendar year that it looked like he was going to be on campus, and he didn't end up making it, not for some nefarious reason, but didn't end up making it. And so to get him back for an event like that, I think was huge. Lots of other Savannah kids there. David Busey, his teammate, the commitment. Then the kids from Calvary Day had Thomas Blackshear, the wide receiver, had Michael Smith, the Gamecock commitment from Calvary Day on hand. They got to hang out, get some FaceTime with each other. And then, of course, you mentioned Adams, who he's probably in Cam Pringle territory with how many visits he's taken to South Carolina, and USC's been in a good spot there. Shane Beamer has staked his claim to Amari Adams there. It's kind of Georgia will be in the mix. There'll be some other ones in the mix, but it kind of seems, Wes, like that's one where you're hard pressed to see it going against South Carolina. You're right. Those two would be huge pickups. Griffin, man, probably a long way to go there. Competition's fierce. Mentioned Nick Saban earlier. He's after him. Kirby Smart at Georgia after him. Dabo Swinney at Clemson. But Shane Beamer and his staff, Jody Wright, Travian Robertson, they've done a good job with that kid, and they're as in the mix as you could hope and dream to be right now with Elijah Griffin, who's currently the number 2 prospect in the country according to the On3 industry ranking.
Yeah, absolute stud, and that's going to be an all-out battle. I think, to the very end. We'll see what South Carolina can do there, but going to have its share of ups and downs. I'm sure he'll be on campus at some point, maybe multiple times during the season. And, we'll obviously be tracking that one. Chris, why don't you tell everybody about your experience recently with our friend Larry at Liberty Tax? If you want to get a head start on your taxes, give Larry a call. 3 convenient locations here in the Midlands, 803-462-5576. And Chris Clark got an early head start on his taxes for next year.
I will gladly tell the folks about Larry and Liberty Tax. Yeah, wife and I met with Larry at his office. We've had a couple follow-up calls even. Might be like, wow, it's not even tax season. It's July 31st. That's because we're planning ahead. And Larry does a fantastic job with that. Maybe your taxes are simple. Maybe they're a little bit more complex. Maybe you have questions about some of your returns that have been filed in the past. He can help you with all that. Any tax questions, overcome your taxiety. I actually have absolutely none, Wes. No taxiety whatsoever because Larry and his team at Liberty Tax taking care of me. I was over on the St. Andrews Road location, Wes, but they have other ones. Lake Murray Boulevard, I know, is one right next to our guys at Firehouse Subs, actually. They have an office right there. So give them a call. Check them out. Larry and his team at Liberty Tax, they do an outstanding job.
For sure, man. Again, there it is, 803-462-5576. Man, Chris, I'm sure we missed some recruiting stuff, but we've really hit on about 52 minutes of recruiting content. So let's leave it like that. Leave it right there on recruiting. But football later this week, we're gonna have a media day. We're gonna have some actual watching practice time a little bit, maybe an unofficial depth chart. As we roll into this thing, man, is there a storyline or two that is starting to kind of percolate in your head that you're most intrigued or most interested to kind of start to learn about?
Man, it is really hard to narrow it down. I think when I look at the offense, I do tend to gravitate towards the run game, right? And so kind of looping in the offensive line to that, because protection obviously is going to be a question. Your left tackle that you're going to have as a starter is out. But I really go towards the run game. I feel like South Carolina is going to have to be able to run the ball at times when they really need to be able to get over the hump in a couple of these games. So I'm looking at the run game. I don't know how much of a sense we'll get to visually see during the preseason, but we might hear some things. On the flip side of that, run defense, I mean, is probably one of my biggest questions. And it's going to be interesting, Wes. So those two things, it's like opposing forces. So if we hear coming out of the preseason, man, this Gamecocks run game, it looks better than we thought. Well, then you're going to start thinking, because of what we've seen the past couple of years with the run game struggles, you're going, that might not be good. You know, it's the classic kind of coaches say, well, we turned over the ball 5 times in practice. Defense did a great job. The offense did a poor job.
Yeah.
So because they're playing each other, you don't get a great sense for it. So I really don't know that we'll get great answers to those things until they kick it off against UNC, and then we see a few games this year. But nonetheless, I think we'll hear some things, hear enough nuggets to be able to say, hey, here's kind of how things are progressing. So run game, offensively and defensively, that's a big one for me. And Shane Beamer's highlighted both of those too.
I think that is one of the most difficult things about trying to give fans realistic expectations about what to expect from a team this time of year is that very thing. Is it that guys are stepping up at one spot and, and that spot's going to be great? Or is it that the other side is struggling? And it's really no matter what part of the team you're talking about, there's always almost a negative for every positive. You know, if your receivers are just getting open all day long, then, well, man, are these DBs going to struggle in coverage? You know, like you said, if the run game is being successful every single practice, every single scrimmage, then it's, we're going to struggle to stop the run. similarly, if guys are in the backfield, quote, hitting your quarterback, not that you allow them to actually literally get hit, but if they're in his face every play, it's, well, is the pass rush coming along or is the pass pro an issue? And I do think, even looking back, Chris, some of those early Muschamp years, do you remember when he kind of put it on tape or put it on press conference film that, hey, this offensive line is, I'm paraphrasing, but this offensive line is going to have to be a strength of this team, or basically this offensive line is going to carry us because we've got veterans. And then people held that against him for pretty much the entire season when they weren't a consistently physical, successful offensive line. And I look back, I think some of that was just that they were succeeding in practice against a front seven that didn't end up being great at stopping the run. So I think, I don't know what you want, man. I guess some days you probably want there to be a give and take, right? Like you want for the offensive line to have a day where they dominate, and you want the defensive line to kind of bounce back the next day and say, well, we're here too. But even then, it's impossible for both of them to be consistent at all times because they're battling with each other.
Well, and the example that I thought of on an individual level is, I remember when they used to have the fully open practices under Spurrier, and we're out there watching one-on-ones, and it's Stephon Gilmore versus Alshon Jeffrey, right? Like, one of those guys is going to win, but they're both going to win battles, and it's going to be tightly contested, and they're both great players. So I think ultimately that's what you want to get to. And I don't think either of those, the run defense nor the run game offensively is going to be a finished product, right, with what you would like to see in, I guess call it year 4 or 5 of Shane Beamer, when the program has really been built up, if it ends up being built up like you would draw it up. But both of those things do have to improve, right? You got questions to answer on both sides of the ball. So, yeah, just a competitiveness, seeing some good individual moments from guys, seeing some good collective moments. I think that's what you want to see in preseason camp.
Let's see, man. We got a couple questions. We're about out of time, but Chris, you got time to hit a couple of these?
Yeah, let's do it.
Big Red asking how many practices are open to the public. So, unfortunately, no practices open to the public. There will be a few open to the media that will be able to, part of a few of them will be open to the media, which we'll be able to report on. And also a question earlier about Jonte Gilbert, class of 2025, highly rated guy. I think top 35 overall in the country, big-time safety prospect. Was committed to Ohio State, recently decommitted over the weekend, visited South Carolina, visited Georgia Tech. And, Chris, you've kind of been all over this one. This is a guy who has been – it's kind of been rumored that there could be an Ohio State breakup for quite some time. That is now official. But during that time he was committed to them, South Carolina has really done quite a bit of groundwork on getting him on campus, building those relationships, and could be a name to keep an eye on, I think, for that 2025 class.
Yeah, definitely. I think on campus a couple times this spring, back this summer, not for the cookout, but the day before. And then he was actually at Georgia Tech on Friday. And those actually, Wes, he's got a big-time offer list, but it's those two schools that actually I think are probably the biggest factors right now. And just done a really good job with them. Torian Gray's done a great job for South Carolina. There was a point, Wes, where I was really monitoring, okay, is this guy going to be a flip for South Carolina, or could this be a decommit from Ohio State and then kind of very quickly jump in South Carolina's class? Maybe that still happens. As of right now, looks like it's probably going to go a little longer. And so that kind of leaves room for some twists and turns. It might go all the way till next spring, from what I'm told. So if that happens, that leaves your entire football season, more visits, you would think, for South Carolina and others. But right now, Carolina is in a pretty good spot. We'll see if that holds, but they've laid a really good groundwork.
I think everybody's going to be involved with this kid now. So, like you said, they'd probably be in a good spot to kind of, if he wanted to go ahead and be done with it. But you know, Georgia's going to make their run here too. Matter of fact, I was reading the On 3 Georgia site. They do a fantastic job covering Georgia recruiting, Georgia athletics, and they were talking about, hey, Gilbert and Georgia, definitely mutual interest there. So I got to watch, but never easy with these big time, borderline future 5-star type guys. So someone to watch, but we'll see. And I tell you what, William Jones has a question here about Braswell, and we normally don't do this many ad reads in one show, but I actually need to get one more in. So you guys hang tight, and we're going to answer this Braswell question. But first, going to tell you about our friend Andy at My Perfect Franchise. So you can find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. Andy Luedecke is the owner of myperfectfranchise.net. You can contact Andy 404-973-9901 or shoot him an email, andy@myperfectfranchise.net. And essentially what Andy does is if you are wanting to leave the corporate rat race, if you're wanting a side hustle that you can make some side money, or if you want to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, or if you're just ready to get out of having a boss and you want to be your own boss, Andy can help you with this. He is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner. What he does is he helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. The best thing about this is that his services are 100% free. He is here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Again, myperfectfranchise.net. Shoot him a text, 404-973-9901. So as promised, we had a DJ Braswell question. And Chris, I think the more we have heard about this running back room, and we said this last week, but the more we've heard about the running back room, the more I think you feel okay about this group. Partially, the carry on has been fantastic as far as getting settled into that spot. I think Juju and Mario Anderson can give you something there. DJ Braswell is kind of the wild card here. You have Cam Sandlin as the guy who's moved over. Is it fair to expect a ton from him there? Maybe not, but it does give you another emergency option there. And, I just think the bigger question mark has kind of moved for me to, can they figure out offensive line? I'm just not quite as concerned about the running back room. And I think Braswell, judging by comments on and off the record, I think Braswell is going to have every single opportunity to help this football team.
Yeah, a fast kid. And, Wes, we knew he was fast. I think you look at the track times in high school, what is it, probably 10.7 in the 100 meters. You turn on the high school tape, you see him running away from guys. He's fast. We knew that. But then he gets to campus and you hear, okay, this is one of the faster guys on the team. And you hear some of the names that are kind of alongside of him in the speed department. And that's eye-opening, especially a guy that plays the running back position. So there'll be some tests for his readiness throughout fall camp, putting the pads on, SEC competition for the first time. That he has that have been as advertised when he got to South Carolina, the way that he's picked up some things. I think he's going to have every opportunity, and we'll see, he may prove himself ready to help out some. And I do think he would give a level of dynamicism that probably is not quite there in the running back room, in that he's a different type of back. All these guys that they've got are different types of backs, and I think Braswell's the biggest potential like home run type of guy. So he's a player that I'm really, really interested to watch, or probably we won't get to see a ton of him. Interested to hear how he's doing in preseason camp.
Definitely maybe a guy who can do some things the rest of the room maybe cannot, I think. And I mean, are we fair to say highest upside in the room?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a position too, if you can figure out the pass pro elements of it and learn the mental side quickly enough. That's a position where you can play pretty early and you can help your program pretty early. So a lot of eyes, as Dow Loggins has said. He said, look, this is one of the freshmen who is most important to this team in terms of possibly reaching their ultimate goals, especially on offense. So something to keep an eye on there. But all right, y'all, we are out of time here. We had some great numbers. You can tell Josh said football's in the air. You can tell football's in the air because the numbers were definitely sky high. And we're going to have a lot more shows now that football is back. So be on the lookout for that. GC Live will be back on air when Mike Uva is on Tuesday night. And then Chris and I will be back later in the week. So appreciate y'all as always. Appreciate all of our sponsors as always. Y'all have a great day, and we'll